The afternoon sun over Virginia Beach was brutal, a heavy, wet blanket of heat that made the asphalt shimmer. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Jenkins, known to the men of SEAL Team 4 as the Sarge, was technically off duty. She wore civilian clothes, a simple pair of khaki shorts, a faded navy t-shirt, and well-worn sandals. Her light brown hair, usually pulled back in a severe bun under a tactical helmet, was loose, falling just past her shoulders. She was waiting for her younger sister, Chloe, who was running late, as usual. They were meeting at a popular beachfront bar called the Salty Mermaid, a place where the beer was cheap, the music was loud, and the crowd was a mix of tourists and military personnel. For Sarah, it was a rare moment of anonymity. Here, she wasn't the commanding officer of the most elite counterterrorism unit on the East Coast. She wasn't the woman responsible for the lives of 120 of the nation's finest warriors. She was just a woman waiting for her sister, enjoying the ocean breeze. Chloe finally arrived, all apologies and bright energy. She was the opposite of Sarah, an artist, a free spirit who lived in a world of color and texture. Their dynamic was a comfortable one. Sarah, the pragmatic protector, and Chloe, the creative soul she'd looked out for since they were kids. They grabbed a small, high-top table near the railing that overlooked the sand. They ordered fish tacos and a couple of local craft beers, and for a blissful half hour, they were just two sisters catching up. Chloe talked about a new gallery opening in Norfolk, and Sarah found herself laughing. The tension of the last few months, a grueling deployment and a high-stakes training cycle, beginning to melt away. The trouble started small. A group of 4 men had taken over the table next to them. They were loud, boisterous, their laughter a little too sharp. They were clearly celebrating something, their table littered with empty bottles of a high-end vodka. They wore expensive polo shirts and boat shoes, the uniform of the privileged and entitled. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a thick neck and a permanent sneer, kept glancing over at Sarah and Chloe. Sarah noticed, but she'd learned long ago to choose her battles. A sideways glance wasn't a threat. She ignored him, focusing on Chloe's story about a difficult patron at the art supply store where she worked part-time. Then the man, the others called him Trip, made his move. He picked up his half-full glass of vodka and cranberry juice and sauntered over to their table, leaning against the railing with a practiced casualness that was meant to be charming. "Ladies," he said, his smile too wide. "Beautiful day, isn't it? My friends and I were just saying how 2 beautiful women shouldn't be sitting all alone." He gestured with his glass towards his table where his buddies were watching with smirks. "Come on, join us. We're celebrating." "Drinks are on us." Chloe offered a polite but firm smile. "Thanks, but we're good. Just having some sister time." Tripp's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened slightly. He ignored Chloe, his gaze settling on Sarah. There was a glint in his eye, a challenge. "What about you? You look like you could use a real drink." He let his eyes drift down her body and back up again. "A real man to buy it for you." Sarah met his gaze, her own expression utterly neutral. "No, thank you. Here, we're fine." It was a dismissal, clean and professional. In her world, it was the equivalent of ending a briefing. But Trip wasn't from her world. He wasn't used to being dismissed, especially not by a woman in sandals and a t-shirt. The alcohol had dissolved the thin veneer of his civility. "What's your problem?" he snapped, his voice losing its faux friendly tone. "We're just trying to be friendly. You think you're too good for us or something?" He leaned closer, his breath a sour mix of alcohol and arrogance. Chloe shrank back, her eyes wide with apprehension. Sarah didn't move. She just watched him, a calm settling over her that was more unnerving than any show of anger. "The problem is you're bothering us," Sarah said, her voice low and even. "Walk away." The command in her voice, born of years of leading men in life or death situations, should have been a klaxon call to any sober person. But Tripp was too far gone. He saw it as an insult, or a challenge to his dominance. "Bothering you?" he snarled. He straightened up, his face reddening. "You come to a place like this dressed like you just rolled out of bed, and you think you're too good to talk to anyone?" His voice was rising, drawing the attention of nearby tables. The bartender, a burly man with a worried look, started to make his way over. In one swift, ugly motion, Tripp lifted his glass and threw the contents directly into Sarah's face. The icy-cold liquid splashed across her cheeks, her nose, her hair. It dripped from her chin onto her t-shirt. Chloe gasped, letting out a small shriek of shock and horror. For a single, eternal heartbeat, everything was silent. The world seemed to freeze. Sarah didn't wipe her face. She didn't flinch. She just sat there, the pink liquid dripping from her jawline onto the table, her eyes fixed on Tripp with an unnerving, almost clinical calm. The bartender stopped in his tracks. Tripp's smirk returned, bolstered by what he saw as his victory. His buddies hooted with laughter from their table. "Yeah, that's right," he muttered, turning away in triumph. The silence was broken not by Sarah, but by a sharp, Ching-Kui voice from the doorway. "Commander Jenkins?" The voice cut through the bar noise like a blade. A young man in the crisp, immaculate dress, whites of a Navy lieutenant, was standing there, a manila folder in his hand. He had clearly just walked in, and his eyes scanning the room before landing on their table. He saw his commanding officer, the woman who had briefed him on sensitive mission parameters just 48 hours prior, sitting with a bright red liquid dripping from her face and a large, aggressive man looming over her. He didn't hesitate. He strode forward, his face a mask of professional concern, completely ignoring Tripp. He stopped at their table, came to attention, and held out the folder. "Commander, I'm sorry to interrupt your liberty, ma'am, but the Admiral sent me. We have an urgent situation. He needs you at the briefing room in 1 hour. The entire task force is being activated." He spoke the words with a quiet reverence that was unmistakable. He was speaking to his superior officer. Tripp had frozen mid-stride, his back to Sarah. He slowly turned around, his face a complex canvas of confusion and dawning dread. His eyes darted from the lieutenant's immaculate uniform, with its gold braid and medals, to the seated woman he had just humiliated. The lieutenant had called her "Commander." Sarah finally moved. She took a paper napkin from the dispenser on the table and calmly, deliberately, wiped her face. She didn't look at Tripp. She took the folder from the lieutenant. "Thank you, Lieutenant. I'll be there." Her voice was the same low, even tone she had used with Tripp. It was the voice of command. The lieutenant hesitated, in his eyes flickering for a fraction of a second towards Tripp, a silent question in his gaze. "Do you need me to handle this, ma'am?" Sarah gave the tiniest, almost imperceptible shake of her head. "That will be all." The lieutenant nodded crisply. "Yes, ma'am." He turned on his heel and walked out, leaving a vacuum of stunned silence in his wake. The air was thick with it. Chloe was staring at her sister, her mouth slightly open. She knew Sarah was in the Navy, but the details were always vague. A logistics specialist was the official story. This was something else entirely. The people at the nearby tables were staring, whispers starting to circulate. Task force, Admiral, Commander. Tripp stood rooted to the spot, his face pale. The swagger was gone, replaced by a horrible, sinking realization. His buddies at the other table were suddenly very interested in their drinks, their eyes downcast. The bartender, who had witnessed the whole thing, leaned on the bar, a slow grin spreading across his face. Sarah stood up. She was of average height, but in that moment, she seemed to fill the space. She finally turned to look at Tripp. There was no anger in her eyes, no triumph. Just a quiet, penetrating disappointment, the kind a teacher might have for a particularly disappointing student. "You should probably go," she said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. It was far more terrifying than any shout could ever have been. It was the voice of someone who had stared down armed insurgents, who had made decisions that meant the difference between life and death. This man, this pathetic display of drunken aggression, was beneath her notice. He was an inconvenience, a minor glitch in an otherwise pleasant afternoon. She picked up her purse, tucked the manila folder under her arm, and placed a comforting hand on Chloe's shoulder. "Come on, Chloe. I need to get changed." The Admiral doesn't like to be kept waiting." Chloe, still in a daze, slid off her stool and stood beside her sister. As they passed Tripp, who hadn't moved a muscle, Sarah paused. She looked him directly in the eye. "For what it's worth," she said, her voice low enough for only him to hear, "my team and I spent last month clearing a village of men who thought they could do whatever they wanted to women, too. They're no longer a problem." She didn't wait for a response. She and Chloe walked out of the Salty Mermaid, leaving a wake of stunned silence. As they stepped onto the boardwalk, the warm evening air a sharp contrast to the charged atmosphere inside, Chloe finally found her voice. "Sarah," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What was that? Who are you?" Sarah gave her a small, tired smile, the mask of the commander slipping away to reveal the sister underneath. "I told you," she said gently. "Logistics." She squeezed Chloe's shoulder. "I have to go." "Rain check on the tacos?" She gave Chloe a quick hug and walked towards the parking lot where her unassuming sedan was parked. A moment later, a sleek, black government-issue SUV pulled up. The young lieutenant jumped out and opened the back door for her. As she got in, she glanced back towards the bar. Through the window, she could see Tripp being escorted out by the bartender, his friends trailing behind him like scolded puppies. He was a small man in a big world he didn't understand. In a world where the quiet woman you choose to bully might just be the one in charge of the nation's most formidable warriors. The SUV pulled away, merging into the flow of traffic, carrying Commander Sarah Jenkins from a moment of personal indignity back to the world she commanded, a world of life and death, where her decisions carried the weight of history and where a spilled drink was the least dangerous thing she'd face all week. She opened the folder and began to read, on her mind already shifting gears, the incident at the bar already a distant, insignificant echo. The mission was all that mattered. It always was.